Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So we just had our first public class. You were
I
there?
know, it was really nice to be outside.
Yeah, it was
and
nice to see
people. And
yeah, and kind of have, and so that was. So we're actually
how
not.
was it like teaching?
It was cool. I mean, it's just because it's in that public space,
Right.
and and we're not in a yoga studio. I mean, I have to admit, I'm not teaching it like I would not call it a Jivamukti open class.
No.
Because I'm not doing the Dharma talk. I'm not doing the chanting.
No.
I'm not doing, because there's something about it once it goes into that kind of public arena that it's not that you can't do it, but one, the sun is beaming down on you
Yeah.
outside. So
Now, it's not like a park. It is fenced in, and it's level because it's AstroTurf. I actually found the ground really nice to practice on, better than regular grass, because it wasn't slidey or muddy or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a soccer field.
Yeah.
And it's in a weird it's
in
in
a
a
weird
weird place because it's surrounded by where the parkway kind of picks up and a couple of major intersections, and in reality it's kind of isolated. Like there's a lot of stuff going by you, but there's not a lot of people with their dogs or the kids running around.
That's nice.
That's kind of
yeah.
nice. But just because of you're in that heat, because it was good like the first hour, but as soon as we hit that
As soon as we started laying in Shavasana, I was like,
I could
okay,
feel
I
the
start to
heat
feel
of the
it.
sun. So there's just things I don't do, and so I teach it very much like I do my corporate classes.
Yeah.
It's very much like I kind of
Well, and I noticed just because, I mean, you're using a mic, which is, I think, like necessary in that area, but you still are competing with other sounds and everything. So I was listening to you today. I was like, okay, clear, precise, not too many alignment cues is the way to go. Like, just get it out there.
Yeah, and let people experience it. And also, people don't have props always because they're bringing their own stuff, so we're not providing props. So, like when you do something that's challenging, you have to kind of, if they don't have blocks, their own blocks, then you have to kind of accept that they're going to attempt it, and that, whereas in the studio you would take the time and go over and put a block underneath their hand, or maybe get them a belt, or kind of give them offer assistance like that. But in this situation, you have to. It becomes much more kind of just about the experience of being together, and kind of and not this idea of asana as a science.
Right. I totally agree with that. And maybe even an opportunity to explore different ways of practicing it.
Yeah.
When resources are scarce and the setting is not typical.
Right.
Because I was thinking, okay, we're going to have to use fists and fingertips for certain things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just give the cues differently so that people don't treat it the same as pressing the palms down, because it's not, and you can still have stability, but it's just a different kind.
Yeah. And I'm not a big fan of this.
No, but it's going to happen in that realm.
But in that kind of realm, it's going to happen because there were a couple of times I said, guys, try to use your full palm.
Yeah.
But it was when there was weight bearing.
I agree.
And
when an extended angle A, I can get my hand down, but it just doesn't feel as effective. And I tried putting my fist down, and I was like, all right, that works, actually. That's just an extra 4 or 5 inches that at least the wrist is in a safe position.
And the reason because we haven't really didn't really talk about hands and wrists while we did this special thing. But the reason why I don't like this is anytime you start to put pressure and you see knuckles, the flesh, or where knuckles are or joints are going white, that means you're putting pressure in those joints that is unnecessary. And you do see these kind of crazy acrobatic guys and people on Instagram doing this. I just don't think I have a friend who she was an Anusara teacher for many, many years. And she's a little bit like me. She started yoga a little later in life, like in her 30s though. It's a little earlier than I did. But she became an Anusara teacher and became a very advanced Anusara teacher. And Anusara taught that. She retired and continued to teach. She was also in business. By the time she hit 67 years old, she had to go to California to have reconstructive surgery on her hands.
Wow.
Because she had messed up her knuckles and joints so much from doing this and putting pressure into it.
The only time I ever really do this is when it's completely not weight bearing, and it's a good way to kind of like have that external rotation of the upper arm, and like you kind of feel like the teres major and minor start to like contract a little bit, but there's no, I think it's fine when there's no weight bearing, but yeah, if you start putting weight there, you're hyperextending in the joint. One. And then, you know, the wrist is interesting because it can move in quite a few different ways, right? But this is kind of like keeping it in a position that's, it's not really like straight. It's a very weird rotation of the wrist joint as well.
Yeah, and then the other reason why I don't like it is, and this is that historical kind of, you know, nut I can be, that meaningless information, but there was a type of lace that was made in Ireland, especially, and it was called cat's cradle, and it was, you would do like string around your hands, and you hold your hands like a cat's paw, like when a cat sticks out his little claws. And these women would sit here all day doing this and creating this amazing lace work from called, and it was like I said, it was like their hands were the loom. The women were crippled by the time they reached middle age. These young girls were crippled.
Wow.
And their hands had locked up in what they called cat paws. And it was so bad that in Victorian England and Ireland, right? And this is the Victorian world where they are like, you know, child labor and everything. They outlawed it.
Oh, wow.
They actually realized that there were these whole generation of women who couldn't work or anything by the time they were in their 20s or 30s because their hands had locked up, keeping that tension in their hands, making
fascinating.
lace. And so that is that same shape. And that is the same pressure that you have to keep the loom to do the intricate knot work.
That's fascinating.
So I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah, and when you think about it, like, because the counter to that could be, somebody could say, like, well, when you're in an arm balance, there has to be a sort of activation upward, right? Kind of like a grip thing. But
that's different.
That's a way different shape. It's not
That's
this,
not
right?
that.
It's a suctioning up of the palm of the hand and a gripping of the fingertips, right?
Right.
But you're still grounded in the heel of the hand and everything too.
It's a very that's even that kind of like, you kind of pull the floor back towards you for a handstand and grip the floor. That is not the same as that.
Well, there's no sort of hyperextension happening
And there's
either.
And there's not weight bearing
in the fingertips.
The fingertips and
yeah, and also like we're not. I mean, I'm not. Maybe there are people who do this here, but I'm not like a rock climber, right? So you got to have a lot of grip strength. Maybe then, if you had that much grip strength, you wouldn't have that sort of action happening. But like, if you're going to do that to your fingertips, you have to work really hard
to
and
get
go to
strong
rock
hands.
climbing. Yeah, to have incredibly strong grip strength.
Yeah. And most of the times, like I said, you see a lot of men do it. Like you see men doing these asanas where they're balancing on their fingertips. I'm not saying you don't see women, but when the majority of them are men, and men normally, not always, but have stronger hands, bigger hands than most women.
Yeah, of course.
And like, you know, and that was the thing about John Friend, because I was like, who is teaching this? And then when you saw John Friend, he was a little taller than I was, but he's kind of built like a refrigerator. He's just kind of a box, and he had these big hands, like these kind of big square Fred Flintstone hands, like, you know, and you realize, well, no wonder he's teaching this way. He's perfectly comfortable. Not that I think that would be wise for him to do it either. No, I would tell him to put a block under his hand too. But he was like, why? You know, when I saw him and I met him for the first time, I realized it was that thing, once again, that yoga teachers do, that something is okay in their body, and then they proceed to tell everybody else to do it. Right. Instead of actually looking and seeing what's going on in their students' bodies, and actually giving them different advice, not based upon their own experience, but what they are observing. And that's, that's a different type of teaching altogether. Like, just it feels good in my body.
That's what we said yesterday. Is like not every alignment cue is for every body. Literally. And so I think that was like, it's just, and I tend to think that, when yoga teachers can only teach from their point of view of their achievement, or their are going the opposite extreme, teaching from their injuries. That's just as bad. Like, I mean, I'm so like, oh, I can't do something because I have an injury. Well, therefore I'm not going to teach it. It's very difficult to isolate an injury to a specific occurrence unless it is like a broken bone or a stretched ligament or tendon, right? Like a sprain. Like you feel it happen instantaneously. So often I had an SI joint problem, right? And I thought, oh, it's because I'm going too far into like the splits and extensions and stuff in yoga class. But really what it was is because I had an anterior pelvic tilt, so it lengthened my hamstring complex, it weakened my abdominal muscles, and it tightened my hip flexors. So I brought that habitual pattern, because I was standing that way in life and moving through life that way, and I brought that habitual pattern into a movement philosophy and modality that it just kind of increased it, because it brought hyper awareness to it, and I was bringing that pelvic tilt into this. So yoga actually helped me correct it, because I realized what I was doing wrong posturally. But it got a lot worse because I was just overemphasizing the improper imbalanced movement pattern here.
But what I'm saying is, then you see certain teachers who, because they have an anterior pelvic tilt,
they say don't do something.
They'll tell people to do that. Like that whole sway back thing that was so popular was all about, everybody trying to look like Kim Kardashian, and like people in yoga trying to do these Instagram photos of these, anterior pelvic tilts with their rib cage and their abdomen forward, and then everything became a back bend. And that's one thing. But then, the other, what I was actually saying was like people who like go, oh, I have a shoulder injury, I can't do forearm stand, therefore I'm never going to teach forearm stand. I'm like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you holding everybody else back as a teacher because you can't do this? You should learn how to teach it, and teach it verbally.
Well, and also avoidance, right? Avoidance is something, if you want to talk about anatomy, right? Unless you have something that is like in the midst of an injury, so injury, basically, it throws off your entire kinetic chain, right? The entire movement system. Because let's say I have an ankle sprain. Okay, well, that is eventually going to translate to knee and hip problems unless I do rehabilitation and actually do movements that may feel uncomfortable once you get a doctor's permission, obviously. But unless you retrain like the muscles of the glute and the calf muscles and the adductor and abductor muscles, like you have to focus on those things. You can't reroute it and go around and not do something, because that is just going to lead to the muscle never rebuilding itself, the neurons never rebuilding themselves and getting the proper. So the more you reinforce that, right? The more difficult it's going to be, and the more you avoid it, then you're never gonna heal it. You're never gonna heal it.
And then if you're a teacher and you're struggling with it, you know, it doesn't mean your students are going to struggle with it. So don't. You know, you know, because so I do this kind of back and forth where I'm like, don't do your hands like this, but then I'm like, you know, also like, you know, there are things that I think that like I can't do that I teach all the time, that I like, you know, that they're not I'm not going to experience them in this body, but it's interesting to deal with injuries and look at injuries. Because in reality, everybody's either has them or is going to have them at some point.
All of us probably in the modern world experience some sort of impeded movement pattern, right? Because of the nature of our work, the nature of our lifestyle. I mean, it's just different. It's just different now than it was even 100 years ago, and especially 200 years ago, and especially 1,000 years ago, right? Like our movements are just different.
And a lot of times we're like, because we're not really physical at work, there's a lot of office jobs and kind of, you know, moving information around digitally. When we go out to be physical, we're far more aggressive than people who were physical working.
Right, where it was much more about sustained actions, like walking long periods,
or
being out in the field
for 8 hours, or plowing for 8 hours. Whereas it was also
well, I remember like CrossFit, not picking on any sort of people, right? Because I'm sure that has any sort of physical activity is going to have positive health benefits, I believe. But I remember talking with Harry, because I was like, this looks like dangerous on your joints, and Harry was saying, because he was a martial artist all through growing up, and he was like, I used to do that kind of conditioning. So then you go into and practice the martial art. So it has a direction, right? And that's what I see in a lot of fitness type thing, is like just doing it for the sake of doing it, and then you kind of miss out on the purpose, right? It's like how asana is directed toward meditation. So I think it's really important to have intention behind the movement as well, because you just see people like running, you know, and their alignment is all off, and it's like, well, what are you pushing toward that you're putting your body into this breaking point?
Well, also that whole kettlebell thing, that snatch and jerk. I mean, you know, that was something that we taught in weightlifting, and it was specific because it's a move that they actually do in Olympic weightlifting. But if you look at the people who are actually participating in that sport, they are they're not, you know, light people. They are very dense trunks, dense glutes, thighs, hips, buttocks, because that's where the strength of that snatch and jerk comes from. And when you see people just kind of throwing this kettlebell,
oh, I know,
and I'm just like, oh my God.
I know, there's a way to do it, because I have found, so I saw a trainer maybe like 2 years ago, because I was just having such bad hip and SI joint pain, because that area, that posterior chain area, was just so underdeveloped, and I was using kettlebells, and that trainer ended up leaving, and he was great, and I got another one who was trying to push a little bit more toward that sort of like, just do the movement, and I was like, I'm not going to do it, because form is way more important. And I found great relief, and I have 0 hip and SI joint pain now, and my practice has, like the physical practice, has much more improved because of doing those type of things. So if you're going to weight lift and strength train, which you should, like, you lose muscle mass and bone density the older you get, right? Just make sure that you're doing it with proper form. And that goes with asana too.
Yeah.
Because asana is a form of strength and flexibility training. And if you have improper posture, you're in it, in alignment, you're going to give your brain the wrong information, and it's going to just reinforce those improper movement patterns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also that kind of thing that what happens, not so much in yoga, but it does happen in sports like weight training and running, that because people can just do it on their own, they just go in and do it on their own, and then they end up with horrific injuries because there is technique both to running and to
for sure,
weightlifting.
For
it
sure.
is not just pick up a set of dumbbells and start doing this.
No.
In fact, you can really screw up. Even with like 5-pound weights, you can screw up your elbow joints beyond belief doing this over and over again. In fact,
that's what
let me tell you this story. So like now, because of this whole CrossFit thing, right? And it's a disease. I can't remember names all the time. But it's where the amino acid builds up in the muscle so much that the flesh dies.
Whoa.
And so a student here, her sister, went to was obsessed with these arm curling classes where you go in and you do 5-pound weights and you just do all these arm stuff to build up your arms and shoulders. It's not heavyweight, she went to she had the day off and she went to 3 of them straight in a row or something because she just was bored. She got home, she couldn't feel her arms. She thought it was just some kind of pinched nerve. She sat down on the sofa. Her left arm turned blue.
Oh my God.
Her boyfriend walked in and said, "We got to get you to a doctor." She lost her arm. Because the amino acids had built up so much that the muscle tissue died. It killed the muscle tissue.
Is it lactic acid?
Lactic acid.
Lactic acid.
Yeah, and it built up. So it was it's a disease, but it's from overuse of muscles, and the muscle finally just starts to disintegrate. And so even when people come to 2 and 3 yoga classes straight in a row, I'm like, that's not really good for you. Do 1 yoga class. But we've had people who would
Whoa.
they would get a special or something, and then they would just start packing in classes, getting their money's worth. And I'm like, you're not getting your money's worth. Don't do this.
No.
And it's not sustainable. Here again, you're chances are this person's only going to come because we did a special financial thing. And then when they have to go to a full price thing, they're not going to even come.
Well, and also
it's the difference between plowing a field for 8 hours knowing that you have to sustain it, and trying to do 6 crazy workouts in 4 hours because you have a half day off.
No, and in terms of flexibility related things, 30 seconds is the peak of how effective that stretch is, and there's a reason for that. It's because that's the amount of time it takes when you're prolonging a stretch, right? So you have the muscle spindles, if you want to talk about the mechanisms, the muscle spindles that are sensitive to length, right? So when you start to stretch, when you at first feel that kind of pull, that's the muscle spindles stretching apart, right? And then you have another counter thing called the Golgi tendon organ that's in the tendons, and it helps the muscles relax when the tension gets too much, right? So it takes about 30 seconds for that sort of Golgi tendon response to kick in and override the muscle spindles telling your brain enough, enough, enough. So that is the optimal amount, because if you overstretch that, right, that's what leads to injury. So 30 seconds, about 30 to 40 is the plateau for an effective stretch. So if you come to 3 or 4 yoga classes a day, right, you are just overriding that response so many times, you are going to injure yourself because that is the biomechanisms of the body. You cannot get around that. You just cannot get around that. Now maybe you go for a run and come to a yoga class because that is 2 different kind of activation, right? But when you're doing these like prolonged things like that or repetitive movement of the same kind, that's how it's going to lead to injury.
Yeah. Like going to like 3.
Yeah, and it's not like you can. It's not like you can outthink your body, right? Your body has these mechanisms. That's you know.
But it's just that that 3 like that, like people thinking that oh, if I do more of something, it's better, and it's like, no, it's not. It's like, oh, if it says take 2 aspirin, I'm going to take 4. No, take 2.
Quality over quantity.
There's a reason why they say 2, not 4. If they wanted you to take 4, they give you 4. But that's kind of like the same thing that happens in like any kind of physical activity too, So and that's also a reason why, like in yoga, where like in other disciplines, even though we're not really doing shavasana in these classes, that yoga put in shavasana, so that there's that moment of conscious rest that actually resets all these energies that we're talking about within the body. I mean, in yoga, they say, oh, it's the subtle energy and all that. It's just because they didn't have the medical expertise that we have.
Yeah, it takes about 6 minutes for the central nervous system to kind of program itself down a notch from like intense movement, which is why you do a 5 to 6 minute cool down in other exercises. Shavasana is the cool down, right? And so that's what it takes for your central nervous system to switch over from active to okay, we're going to go down. You're still burning energy for a while. You'll still have an increased oxygen uptake for a while afterward. But it gives your nerves the time to stop sending impulses to and from the muscles and then the central nervous system to kind of like take it down a notch, right? At about the 9-minute mark, which is about how long Shavasana takes, is the neurogenesis part, where your nerves can actually start to rebuild at the synapses, right? So that's why those time frames are in there. They're not arbitrary.
They're not arbitrary.
Actually, this is what it takes the body to do its thing, right? So it is important. I used to be one of those people that like, Shavasana is for like losers, you know what I mean? Like whatever, I'm just gonna stay there. But if you start to learn the science of it, it is a science. The body is predictable in a lot of ways, and it's cyclical in all of its ways because it's part of the natural world. So if you live in abidance with those principles, you're gonna actually be able to exercise longer and to practice stronger and get into things more deeply if you actually work with those principles instead of just kind of like New York pushing it through.
Well, also I think that like one thing that people aren't clear about Shavasana, there hasn't been a lot of research done, is that once you heat up the joints and the bones like that actually laying on a hard surface like the floor, and laying there that long, the spine readjusts as if you're in, like you're at a chiropractor. You will feel like and the problem is about propping yourself out too much and like bending the knees and putting stuff under the knees and putting stuff under the lower back and putting stuff under the head. You're finding that place where the spine and the hips want to be instead of where they should be. I actually had a friend who was a Alvin Ailey dancer, and he only slept on the floor. And I thought it was some kind of Buddhist monk thing. And he was like, no, it's just that like by sleeping on the floor without a pillow. And he trained himself to do this. It was really, but he really had like this amazing posture.
That's interesting.
And
that makes sense. I mean, in traditional Japanese culture, they sleep on those mats.
It's very flat and doesn't have a lot of squishiness, or not a lot of
It's the same thing about with shoes. Like when Nike started putting a big old air heel on the back of the shoes,
Right.
people's knees started blowing out when they were running, is because the musculature of the feet and ankles weren't able to properly develop. So that's a really good point.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is like because the backs of necks of people tend to be really shortened, sometimes a little thin blanket underneath the head will be good, and then if you have that anterior pelvic tilt habitually, the stuff under the knees is good.
Yeah.
But try to do it part of the time, and then try to do without props the other part of the time.
Yeah, but you and I
So
have
you'd
seen
see the
people with a
difference.
bolster behind the head.
Oh yeah, unless you're pregnant, you
like-
don't really need a bolster in
Like, you know,
Shavasana.
then they got like a bolster underneath the knees.
Yeah, you're not in
It's
like
like-
a
and it's
zero.
like-
You're not like in a float tank. You're on the
yeah,
floor.
it's
It's okay to accept that you're on the floor.
We're not talking about a towel underneath your head. We're talking about, like, I'm saying, like, sometimes you look at people and you're like, oh my God, really? I mean, and it's like, and it's because of some of that, the other disciplines like yin yoga, and
Yeah.
they do that, but it's different, I think, when you.
You know, I have to
work on
read
a
the
hot-
science behind yin yoga because of that 30-second stretch principle that exists. I have to read the science about why they hold things for that long.
For 3 minutes. It's supposed to be 3 minutes, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. And I'm not saying there's any right or, but I have yet to see anything. So if anybody is listening and has some like the science behind yin, I'd be curious, because maybe it's more to act like a mudra type situation. So they talk about like energy flow being locked into one way, but
Right.
in terms of stretching, I've never seen the science behind that 3 minutes.
Yeah. I think, here again, I think that it's that, I don't know enough about it either, and it's that idea of mixing whatever Chinese medicine techniques, which is very different, even from Ayurveda.
Oh,
Like it's
totally.
like it's not the same. Like you cannot mix Chinese medicine and Ayurveda.
Because they talk about meridians, right, in Chinese medicine, and Ayurveda is all about doshas and constitutions, and
Yeah.
it's different. One is anatomically based, and the other has anatomical symptoms, but it's more about the intangible, your persona.
Yeah. And also, this is the way they deal with things is very different. Like,
Yeah.
you know, everything. I mean, you know, in Chinese medicine, they prescribe meat.
Yeah.
I mean, in Ayurveda medicine, you don't. So,
The only thing I've ever seen prescribed in Ayurveda is bone broth for people who are like severely deficient in trace minerals.
yeah,
That's
well,
the only
then
time I've ever
yeah,
seen that.
Then, and I've never even, I didn't even know they did
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
That's the only
but
time
like
I've ever heard of that.
Yeah, but in you know in Chinese medicine, they're like, you know, eat rattlesnake for this, for, you know, for
Yeah.
impotence, you know, like.
Yeah, and even in
bullhorn.
Ayurveda, there's differences between like the yoga that has evolved in the modern day that supports veganism, because Ayurveda tells you to eat a lot of ghee and stuff like that, and so it's you know, you gotta mix the modern day necessities of, you know, yet another swine flu was just discovered in China because of pig factories, you know what I mean? And don't feel guilty about it. It's like guilt is not going to help, but like seeing what it is for what it is like this.
Well,
I
think that also is that this misconception of like why is it. I mean, I won't go long into this, but when we bring up ghee and dairy in the Indian tradition, and why are like we promoting at Jivamukti veganism, and have kind of like actually, because Sharon and David's teachers were, I mean, Sri Ramananda and Patabi Joyce were vegetarians. Swami Nirmalanda was vegan, but in Indian culture, the cows are treated differently. They're just, I mean, it's like they're not pinned up in pens with like 20 cows to a pen and stuffed full of hormones and stuffed full of antibiotics and bred one right after another calf to give milk until they just wear them out, and then dispose of them. So it's a little bit different.
And we also know more now about dairy than we did then, because now we find that 80% of adults are lactose intolerant to some extent. So, so it's like, again, modern day necessities and science mixed with ancient wisdom. What is the balance in between for you as an individual?
And so that, and like you would never in a agricultural society where you're farming and you have a cow and the cow has given birth to a calf, you would never deny the calf the mother's milk.
No.
See, that's the difference in Western farming. The mother has the cow, then the calf is taken away and sent to make veal. Whereas, and so like, you just in a farming situation like that, the calf is more important to have.
Right.
Mainly, and when I say that, like in a place like India, like cow poo is used for fire, for cooking. It's used to make the houses. It's
a disinfectant. Actually,
it's used for all kinds of other things. So it's not like
it's not going into some river and causing a toxic waste buildup within the dam.
It's so different. It's almost uncomparable. It's not comparable. And so if you're like saying, oh well, I'm a yogi and they eat ghee and milk in India. Well, it's like, no, it's not the same. You're supporting an industry that is incredibly destructive and it harms a lot of beings in the West, and it's not happy cows running around California. Sorry.
No.
There is no happy cows.
No.
So it's a very different. So it's that thing where you can't compare those two things.
Yeah.
Because they're so drastically different.
Context.
And I think that also
Context.
India is changing too. It's like, we're talking about India of the past, and now as India keeps industrializing, you're getting
There's
industrial farms.
There's 1 billion people there. There's of course going to be a switch to industrial farming.
You're getting a different kind of farming techniques in India also now that didn't exist even 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So and that's also why you're seeing more Indian swamis who are saying to Indians, you should be vegan. You should not. I mean, the guy I follow, Yogeshri, he tells people, if you can do it, you need to have a vegetarian diet. It would be better if you have a vegan diet.
Yeah.
And he's saying that to Indians now. So and it's like, because he mostly teaches Indians, and so he's actually, and he's saying it because he knows that it's not the Vedic cow if you're going and buying a gallon of milk at a supermarket, even in India.
No.
It's industrial farming, and they're doing the same thing that Westerners are doing now. They're pumping the cows full of hormones, antibiotics, and there's some
interesting legislation that just passed in Canada, but also Cory Booker, our senator in New Jersey here, there's some big shifts because of all of this, and the pandemic's perhaps starting in one of these like animal markets, to really shift toward cruelty-free products,
right?
And have like much more subsidies go into studying and developing products that are devoid of killing, and so it's interesting to watch. But we're going off on a tangent. Yeah. Let's move. I'll teach you to warm up today. Hands underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips. Tuck the toes under, seat back to heels. Lift your hips up, downward facing dog. Lift the kneecaps up the thighs. 1. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Inhale. Exhale, 4. Inhale. Exhale, 5. Soften the knees. Walk your feet forward toward the hands. Stop when your hands and feet are about 6 to 8 inches apart. Press the palms down and then drop the head. Inhale. Exhale, 1. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Inhale. Exhale 4. Inhale. Exhale 5. Soften the knees. Take the feet out mat width distance apart. Bend the knees. Find a deep squatting position, bringing the hands into a prayer in front of the heart center. Lift up at the pelvic floor. Inhale. Exhale 1. Inhale. Exhale 2. Inhale. Exhale 3. Inhale. Exhale 4. Inhale. Exhale 5. Inhale, place the hands down. Exhale, lift the hips up, folding over the legs. Softening the knees, bring the feet together. And then keep the knees soft, chin to chest, rolling up to stand. Draw the arms alongside of the ears, interlace the hands overhead. Press the heels down, pull the lower ribs in, press the fist up. Exhale, side bend to the left. Inhale, up to center. Exhale, side bend to the right. Inhale, center. Exhale, left. Inhale, center. Exhale, right. Inhale, center. Exhale, release the arms by the side. Come up and stand at the very top of the mat.
So a little Surya Namaskar. On your inhale, take the prayer hand overhead. Exhale, fold over the straight legs, Uttanasana. Inhale, lift the head and chest, look up. Exhale, step, jump back, Chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale. Exhale, 1. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Inhale. Exhale, 4. Inhale. Exhale, bend the knees, look past the hands. Inhale, step, jump the feet in between the hands. Exhale, fold over the legs. Inhale, rise up, extend the arms. Exhale, hands by the side to Tadasana. Inhale, take the prayer hand overhead. Exhale, fold over the straight legs, Uttanasana. Inhale, lift the head and chest, prepare. Exhale, jump back, Chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale. Exhale, 1. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Inhale. Exhale, 4. Inhale. Exhale, bend the knees, look past the hands. Inhale, step. Jump the feet in between the hands. Exhale, fold over the legs. Inhale, rise up, extend the arms. Exhale, hands by the side to Tadasana. Little Jivamukti Surya Namaskar. Hook thumbs, reach up, arch back. Exhale, bend knees, arms behind back. Clasp hands together in a fist, straighten arms and legs. Inhale, bend knees, hands down next to feet, step right leg back. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, move forward to plank. Exhale, Chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, plank. Exhale, knees, chest, chin. Inhale, slide forward, cobra. Exhale, tuck toes under, seat to heels, downward facing dog. Inhale, step right foot forward in between hands. Exhale, left foot forward, next to right, fold. Inhale, bend knees, hook thumbs, reach up, arch back. Exhale, reverse, arms behind back, clasp hands together and fist straighten. Inhale, bend knees, hands down next to feet, step left leg back. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, move forward to plank. Exhale, Chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, plank. Exhale, knees, chest, chin. Inhale, slide forward, cobra. Exhale, tuck toes under, seat to heels, downward facing dog. Inhale, step left foot forward in between hands. Exhale, right foot forward next to left, fold. Inhale, bend knees, thumbs reach up, arch back. Exhale, hands by the side to Tadasana. All right.
Let's do one round and review the kind of one breath, one movement thing that we did yesterday, and then we'll actually, you know what? We'll do that later. I think tomorrow again we'll revisit it. So just bend the knees and take the arms overhead, Utkatasana, and then fold. Place your hands down and lift your hips up. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, Chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing. Exhale, downward facing. Inhale, step the right foot forward, left heel down, raise up to a warrior one and stay here. Inhale. Exhale, one. Inhale, left hip crease comes forward, two. Inhale. Exhale, three. Inhale. Exhale, four. Inhale. Exhale, five. Inhale, extend the right leg. Exhale, open arms and hips to the side, preparing for triangle. Inhale, reach out over the right leg. Exhale, right hand down, left arm up. Inhale. Exhale, one. Inhale. Exhale, two. Inhale. Exhale, three. Inhale. Exhale, four. Inhale. Exhale, five. Inhale, lifting up to stand. Exhale, bend the right knee deeply, warrior two. We're going to do something a little different. Place your right hand down inside of the right leg first. Press the right upper arm against the right inner thigh, and then lift the left fingertips and the gaze up. Inhale. Exhale, one. Inhale. Exhale, two. Really connect the right inner knee to the right upper arm and let that pull the heart forward for three, four, and five. Now, press firmly into your feet, lift all the way up to stand again. Remember that pushing action that you needed to lift up, and then just reverse the triangle. As you inhale, come back up to center, then bend the right knee and place the right hand down outside of the right foot. Use a block underneath the right hand. Inhale, lift the left arm up and over the left ear. Now extended angle A. Inhale. Exhale, one. Lift the left inner thigh. Two. Inhale. Exhale, three. Inhale. Exhale, four. Now listen carefully. Inhale, lift the left arm straight up, and then bring the left hand to the left hip. Look down. Pull your back foot in about one heel toe, and then slide the right arm directly forward about 8 inches. Keep your right toes exactly as they are. Now, just like you did standing up, press the right foot down and lift the left leg parallel to the floor, stacking the left hip upon the right. The right knee can stay soft. Draw the tailbone back, left toes point to the left, then the left arm lifts up. Ardha Chandrasana. Inhale. Exhale, one. Inhale. Exhale, two. Inhale. Exhale, three. Inhale. Exhale, four. Inhale. Now exhale, bend the right knee. Bring the left hand down and find a block underneath the left hand. Turn the left toes so they point straight down. Pull the outer right hip back, and then exhale, fold over the right leg, standing split. Inhale, you can point the left toes. Exhale, one. Inhale. Exhale, two. Inhale. Exhale, three. Inhale. Exhale, four. Inhale. Exhale, five. Inhale, bend the right knee, step the left leg back to a low lunge. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, step the left foot forward, right heel to the floor, warrior one. Staying here. Inhale. Exhale, one. So remember that front leg stabilizes, and that back leg is where the power is to open and close the hips, to externally and internally rotate the hips. 3, 4, and 5. Inhale, extend the left leg. Exhale, open the hips and the arms to the side, preparing for triangle. Reaching out over the left leg. Exhale, left hand down, right arm up. Breathe in. Breathe out, 1. Inhale. Exhale, 2. Inhale. Exhale, 3. Inhale. Exhale, 4. Inhale. Exhale, 5. Inhale, lifting all the way up to stand. Exhale, warrior 2. Inhale, left hand down inside of left foot. Lift the right arm up. So this helps me. We're stabilizing the hip, right? So if you push the left knee into the left upper arm, right, there's a contraction on the inside of the right thigh and an opening on the outer left thigh.
Right.
2, 3, 4, and 5. Now lift up at the pelvic floor and use that to lift you up. Then reverse the triangle. Inhale, come back up to center. Then rebend the left knee and place the left arm now outside of the left foot. Now we're pressing the left upper arm against the left thigh, taking the right arm up and over the right ear. So now there's an opening of the left inner thigh and a stabilization of the outer thigh. For 2, you need both to do Ardha Chandrasana. 3, and into that standing split. 4, inhale, lift the right arm up. Exhale, right hand comes to the right hip. Look down. Keep your left toes pointed where they are. Heel toe the back foot in a little bit. Slide the left arm forward on the block. Then press the left foot down and float the right leg parallel to the floor, right toes pointing to the right. Tailbone draws back, and then the right arm extends up. 1. Think about lifting the left kneecap up the left leg. 2. 3. 4, and 5. Now bend the left knee, bring the right hand down, and that will rotate the right hip crease down so the right toes point down. Look up, point through the right toes, pulling the outer left hip back, and then fold forward over the left leg. Breathe in. Breathe out. 1. Inhale. Exhale. 2. Inhale. Exhale. 3. Inhale. Exhale. 4. Inhale. Exhale. 5. Inhale, bend the left knee, float the right leg back. Exhale, downward facing dog. As you inhale, lift your hips up. Exhale, bend the knees, look forward. Inhale, step or hop lightly between the hands, looking up. Exhale, fold. Inhale, bend the knees, Utkatasana. Exhale, coming up to stand. So I like doing we never really do extended A and B.
Right.
But because both of those have a different thing of is the inner thigh or the outer thigh.
Yes.
Stabilizing. For any of these balancing poses, whether it's standing split or Ardha Chandrasana, you need both because the abductors and the adductors help stabilize the hip in both directions in those kind of standing balances. And you can transition, much like we did yesterday, between them.
Yes.
Because there's that stabilization where it knows how to engage, it knows how to release evenly.
Right. Yeah, and I also like that because there's a lot of people now who are kind of, and I don't agree with it. They're saying things like, oh, for like going from Ardha Chandrasana, right? So I have the hips stacked and opened, and then coming and rotating the hip down. Actually, the body does that naturally. There's like there's no like even if I'm in this standing and talking and I go like that, that's what the body just did. So the idea that you shouldn't do it, and I've heard like people like, oh, don't do that rotation.
It's when you're just hanging out in your hips, nothing is engaged, and then you do that sort of rotation. It grinds into the cartilage. The femur bone grinds into the cartilage in the hip. But if you are bending the standing leg, you've already activated the musculature around all of the joints. You're going to have more mobility, and the joint has a more full range of motion than if you're locking out joints and just sinking and collapsing into the hip.
And also, I think it's the knowledge that once I rotate, because a lot of times everybody's thinking about the hip, but once I soften the knee, the foot of the left foot, watch the foot has to rotate.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's the idea that it's not all in the hips. That actually the rotation of the ankle bone and the shin bone and the knee joint actually guides that hip also in a healthy rotation.
And it's funny you talk about the ankle because if you have tightness in your calf muscles, right, this is going to be a very difficult asana for you, which is why bending the knee helps maintain that kind of flexion, right?
But one of the things that we did, we only did it once, and I actually learned it, I can't remember, I was watching I think it was somebody who does a Gosha lineage practice.
Oh, okay.
And I was fascinated with this thing that they were doing, because I tried it and I was like, wow, that's really difficult. Where it was the same idea of you're actually really trying to get the ankle and the hip to work without working it from the hip. So it was that they were holding onto the big toe, setting up tall, but then moving the ankle and the heel to rotate the hip. That it was this learning of that it wasn't the hip doing it, that it was actually from here was a different conscious movement.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, anatomically, you have a lot of the muscles that start in the hip connect to the head of the tibia, which is the shin bone, right? So they do help with, even though the knee is a hinge joint primarily, there is that rotation externally and internally of the shin that happens from the rotation of the hip. You can't move those two independently because the knee is a hinge joint, but those muscles insert here, but their origin is up here, which allows for that kind of rotation to happen.
And I realized that it was probably a really good movement that we don't really investigate in Jivamukti, because then I was watching another guy who isn't like, I mean, this is where the whole thing about, like, they're saying they're yoga teachers, but then they're like, you know, what is it called? Like movement? Like it's like dynamic movement. And it's like, don't call yourself a yoga teacher. Like, because it's not, you're not doing yoga asana, but it's not that what you're doing is not bad. It's just not yoga. I'm sorry. It's trying to attach this new
it's a brand
to something that already exists.
Yeah.
I mean, and but because it was something that he came here, right, and he said, now, it's not about bringing the leg out to the side. First, you have to turn the foot out to bring the leg forward.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was something, because like Jivamukti, we've always kind of shied away from that kind of a movement, but he made the focus on first, the foot has to turn out to the side, which rotates the hip, that then brings the leg forward.
And then to counterbalance, you pull the left hip crease back after.
Right. And I was kind of fascinated with that.
Well, we do that in side leg lifts, but the rotation of the leg doesn't change.
The rotation of the leg.
You know, this is another thing of like, a healthy joint is supported by muscles that have a large range of motion, right? So, yeah, I get, because I've heard that too from like, and I've looked on yoga forums, like, my physical therapist says to never do from that open to closed, and then people are like, but you can do it if you do it consciously, and then it's like, but you can't step back ever, because then you damn it, and it's like, okay, all of these pejorative statements of like, this is the only way, unless it's like, don't hyperextend your knee, I'm very, very reticent to say like, this is the definitive thing for this.
And I do think that, yes, and I think that like with that, even with that leg out to the side, is that if I'm not conscious of the foot and then I just kind of start to bring it over, I am throwing, and then it pinches.
Yeah.
But as soon as I make a conscious effort to rotate the foot, which I can see, not the hip, then I can bring that leg forward.
Well, and the foot rotates, and then the gluteus medius can actually contract the way it's supposed to, because if you just bring the leg out like this,
it pinches.
Yeah, you like all of these kind of muscles pinch, and then the glutes don't engage properly, and then you're just actually putting more pressure on the lower back, right? So there's a reason why we tend to cue from the feet first.
Yeah, and it's just like going into that transition from half moon into standing split. It's like, the cueing really is to soften the knee of the standing leg so that actually that femur can soften and rotate without grinding.
Yeah, and it doesn't collapse into one side.
And the other hip can drop down. But then the toes have to consciously point down for a second. They can't kind of, the ankle and the foot can't kind of keep wanting to be out the side.
No, while that standing leg can, recommend it being softened so
Right.
that you can properly engage the musculature around the hip. That means the leg that is in the air has to be insanely active.
Yeah.
It's like a handstand, right? When we say, I mean, because it's the same thing. When people do this in handstand, what are they doing? They're collapsing into that. But when people bend this leg and keep this leg active and properly engaged, then you don't have to worry about that, sort of collapsing into one hip. And that's what I see so often in handstand, is just the collapsing into one hip, which
Right.
is the same thing as doing that, kind of collapsing into the cartilage when you're not conscious.
Yes. Yeah. So it's I see, I think that we're all like on the same, like, we're getting back to the same thing what we were talking about in the beginning, which is like you can do anything as long as there's some consciousness to it and you're bringing some technique to it,
Yeah.
and you're starting to investigate the things you were unaware of.
Have an informed opinion even in yoga.
Yeah.
And even the yogis that learn from the teachers, their gurus and everything, you learn, but then you have to practice it and learn it yourself.
How
That's
about a little
big
tabletop?
Yeah.
Let's just do a little tabletop. Because everything we did was a forward fold. And exhale 1, inhale. Exhale 2, inhale. Exhale 3, inhale. Exhale 4, inhale. Exhale, come down. Good.
I think that's all the time.
I
have
know.
today.
So, yeah, this is good stuff. And we will be here tomorrow, and we'll add on some more to this.
Yeah, we'll start, now that we have the stability, now we can start going in all different kinds of
Right.
ranges of motion.
And what I like about it is what we're doing this week is very complementary to a vinyasa, like an inhale, exhale vinyasa, dynamic movement.
And how you can do these things in the vinyasa, you don't have to just throw yourself into it.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, and
See
we
you
will
tomorrow.
see you guys tomorrow. And Catherine is teaching tomorrow at
8 a.m.
8 a.m. So be there if you guys are watching and want to do that too.
You're stuck at home, you've got nothing to do. Just roll out your mat and grab a prop or two for yoga at noon. The yoga play-by-play with Ausitn and Kate at Jivamukti, Jersey City at noon.